I didn't even know how I was going to survive the first night. I fell into physical shock. When the FBI agent notified me, I was like holding on to the wall. I mean, I felt like the whole earth had come out from under my feet. Everything I knew, everything I loved, everything I cared for was gone in a flash. And I was terrified for 5 days, just holding on, trying to hold on to anything. And the first night, I tried to alibi my father. I had got online, I was looking at crimes, and I was just absolutely devastated. I had nothing left. And that's when you just sort of cry out, Abba, Father, like, I don't know how I'm gonna get through this night. And that's when I didn't have any strength to pick up my Bible. I tried to pick it up and it just fell to the floor. And God gave me Psalm 23 that night, you know, and it ran through my head all night in pieces. Like, I'm terrible at scripture memorization, but you know, he was saying, like, even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of the death, I'll be there beside you, rod and staff. You know, and that first night, it just ran through my head over and over, like pieces of it. And I woke up the next morning, you know, and I've woke up every morning since. But like my faith that I had like gained in college is what got me through, you know, basically hell, or I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had that.
That faith, you know, as you're wrestling with, you wrote to your dad for a while, you cut your dad off for a while, back and forth, you know, feeling not safe with him. You haven't seen him since he was arrested.
Yeah,
correct?
no, I haven't seen my father. It's just really complicated because it's not like a normal visit. He's in a very far room and it's through video. I'm also just not comfortable. I have PTSD still from the trauma of finding out. So
when the trial happened, you heard he gave details, and then you heard details of evidence of all the things your dad had done, which is horrifying.
Right. I mean, most of my PTSD actually comes from how I was notified. That first several days of being in physical shock and not getting care until we got me home to my family. But really the first 6 months I was dealing with the media, trying to reconcile my memories with what I was learning. And then all of this horrible stuff came out at the plea and sentencing. And I actually cut my father off for 2 years after the sentencing because I couldn't deal with what he was saying and what I knew about him. And he even had like dismissed my family in court, calling us social contacts and pawns in his game. So I cut him off, and then I got pregnant. So I felt like I needed to write him after working in therapy, you know, and starting to heal. And then I cut him off again for 5 years. And I didn't write him for 5 years until I forgave him.
Okay, and so tell me about that moment of forgiveness and how that even happened, because I think for most of us, we're like, wow, how did you ever forgive your daddy for what he did?
So I knew as a Christian it was important to forgive somebody, and I knew God had wanted me to forgive eventually. And I was so hard-hearted against God, I wouldn't even go to church and hear my pastor talk about forgiveness, and I knew that's what he was talking about. I would skip that week. So God was working on me in church and healing me slowly, giving me a quiet, peaceful life, which is what I had prayed for years after my father's arrest. And I still I was holding out on forgiveness. I was holding out on God. And he wrestled with me all fall. I was laid up with an injury in my leg, and I was mad, and you know, I couldn't run after my kids, and God just worked on me and softened me. And I was driving home in December from a movie, and it was late. I was stopped at a red light, and it was like just a light hit me, like from above, just like hit me right in the middle of my soul. And I knew it was God, and I knew he was gave me the forgiveness to forgive my father. Like, the forgiveness came from God. It wasn't from me. It was something he wanted me to do to get rid of that rot that was in me. Because I thought I was doing okay. I was a mom, I was a women ministry leader, I was a wife. On the outside, I looked like I was doing fine, but on the inside, I was basically dying because I had all this hardness and nasty, awful, like everything I knew about my father was just sitting in me.
And what happened to you when you forgave him?
It went away. It was like that night, he lifted it out of me and filled me back with hope. And I drove home and I ran up my stairs and I told my husband, Darian, I said, I've forgiven my dad and I'm gonna sit down and write him after 5 years of not talking to him. So I filled like a 6-page letter full of just like about his grandkids and our new life in Michigan and the life he doesn't have. And at the end, I told him, I've forgiven you. And if you'll ask for forgiveness from Christ, I'll see you in heaven someday.
It was big in the news that he was a Christian and a God-fearing man. Tell me about faith growing up.
So I grew up in a small non-traditional American church, and it was very important that we went every Sunday. Took a bath on a Saturday and dressed up on a Sunday. It was very important to my father, and he ushered in communion in church, and even served as an assistant pastor and then a president. I think, though, it's also important to remember, just because someone is going to church regularly, it doesn't mean they're a Christian, that they have the personal relationship with Christ, which would be my definition of a Christian. I also think it's important to remember, even if you're going to church, it doesn't mean you're religious. Some people just do it because that's what their family does, or it's what is expected of them. And in the case of my father, I think he wanted people to respect that. Like, that was one more level of respect that people had because he was a churchgoer. But I did not know a man that had a personal relationship with God. My mom was very faithful. I shared that with my mom since I was little, but my dad never had that.
And you didn't feel like you had it either. Like, you just didn't feel like that was part of your upbringing.
No, because you end up rebelling against it as a teenager because you're forced every Sunday to do this. You're forced into confirmation class for 2 years. You're forced to sit in the wooden pew and stand up and say things that you don't have any connection to. So you learn about Jesus on a flannel board, but you never learn about Jesus, like the relationship. You don't know how to pray. So I walked away from my faith, and then early in college, I went on a 6-day hiking trip in the Grand Canyon with my father, and we got in way over our heads, and we all could have lost our lives down there. And that was when, again, I was crying out, Abba, Father, like the first time I was praying, and I said, if you're out there, I don't even know if you're out there, but if you're out there, I need help. And as soon as I started praying, God helped us. He found us water, he found us camping sites, he took care of us. And when I was down there, like within 3 or 4 days, I knew God existed, and I could see him. Like, I was looking up at the Milky Way, and I was like, you made this, didn't you? And then I was like, you know what? I need to ask for forgiveness for my sins and come back to you and your son. And I said, if you can get me out of this canyon, I'll be yours the rest of my life. And you shouldn't make a deal with God. Because 2 days later, I got out of the canyon, and as soon as I stepped on the path, he was knocking down on me, and he's like, yeah, you're mine now. And it was 8 years later when, the earth fell out on me with my dad. So, where would I be if I hadn't had that with God, those 8 years with him? He knew what was coming.
And that faith carried you through.
Yeah, the faith kept me alive. That's what kept me alive.